Welcome to FAQ, Business FAQs with me, Burke Franklin, every Thursday afternoon at 1 o'clock California time. I'm here to answer your questions, go over our products. Really, I'm presuming you're already using our products, so that's why you're here, to ask some questions perhaps, or get some guidance, some definitions, some tips, hacks, things you can do to be successful with it. You may be using our Biz Plan Builder business plan software app, and you're raising capital. I've got a lot of ways I can help you with that, a lot of ideas there. A couple things I want to talk about have to do with that today. One of them has to do with psyching up to ask for money, and that's part of it. So the other apps we have are Marketing Builder, which is all about building your marketing strategy. That picks up where Biz Plan Builder leaves off. And we've got Publicity Builder that helps you do that. Write press releases and build your relationships with the media. And we have a employee policy manual. So all these things, if you're using any of those, you've got questions and you want to talk about it, dial in. We've got a chat box on here. You can leave a message or start typing your questions into the little chat box or the Q&A box here. I can answer those for you here. That's what I'm here for. So I'm here to help you with your business in any way I possibly can. So people have said, hey, we like your product. Wish you could come along and answer some questions. Well, all right, here we are. Anyway, so we're starting with this. What I wanted to talk about here, let me put on my glasses here. And I have this, there's the, I'm going to share a screen here. And so, let me share this. So, we hear about, this is an elephant, I think, if you can see it, okay. So the idea is, way back when, in an elephant's life, when he's a baby elephant, they are tied to a small stake in the ground. You probably may have heard this story before, but the idea is, so the baby elephant's tied to the stake in the ground. He or she looks at it, they try to pull away from it, they can't. And, they keep trying and they keep trying and they can't, and they learn, well, I just can't do it. And so then they grow up. And what happens is, with a full-grown elephant, they still use that same small stake in the ground. The full-grown elephant now, who by all rights could just walk away with it, could tear the stake out of the ground, could drag the car that it's hooked to with it, pull a house down the street, all of that, It instead looks at that little stake in the ground and says, never could do that. I won't even try. And that's what's called, in psychological terms, learned helplessness. It was taught to be helpless. And there's many areas, because we look at elephants, we think, well, silly animals, don't do that. You should just pull on that stake one more time and it'll pull out of the ground. You're okay. You can walk away with it. And we think it's an elephant issue. And I want to point out that we all have that issue in some way, shape, or form, and or different things. And you'll notice it in certain patterns that may happen in your life. There's a recurring pattern where you attract certain kinds of people, certain kind of situations, like, why am I betrayed a lot? Why does this happen? Why don't, blah, 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 you can go on. Why do I always attract this kind of a person? Well, somewhere back in your psyche, you have, this is an opportunity. Something happened, and these patterns are in nature's way, if you will, of giving you another opportunity to do it again and do it differently. I think of taking tennis lessons way back when there'd be the tennis instructor on the other side of the court, the net, and he had a shopping cart full of tennis balls. And, for all intents and purposes, he had an infinite number of tennis balls to hit to me. So we're working on backhand, and I kept hitting backhand and backhands and backhands and backhands. You think, what's up with this? But he had noticing that he had a shopping cart full of tennis balls, we could go on and on and on until I get it, which in a way is great. In a way, it seems like, in my experience of our universe here, we're getting these lessons, these opportunities to learn, as if God had a shopping cart full of tennis balls and was hitting them to us. So that said, okay, so like what do we do? So really, how do you get to the bottom of one of these patterns that we might have? And the trick really is to look at, okay, you have this pattern now. When did you have the pattern before? You had it before this. And go back again and again. So if it's a repeating pattern, obviously you have a history of this pattern. If you can, go back to the very first time. What's the first time this pattern happened? And what a lot of people think, or they're led to believe in workshops and other places, is this is our baggage. This is our shit, excuse me. It's all of that stuff. And a friend of mine who's a coach and a therapist named Bill Lamond points out that really, at the time, these are acts of genius. So if something happens in your world that's sort of traumatic, if you will, it is traumatic. You're a small child, and if you come up with an answer or a solution to whatever's going on in your world, like you're in hiding under the bed, or you decide, I'm just going to go eat some ice cream. I'm out of here. I'm going to eat some ice cream. I'm going to do whatever. Those become the solution to that initial problem. And of course, then we end up with some kind of addiction down the road. And we think, you know, how do I deal with this addiction? I've got to stop that. Well, you can stop the addiction, but oftentimes the addiction is replaced with something else. And that's because you haven't dealt with the root cause of what it is you were doing, you're eating for in the first place, or drinking, or whatever you're doing, shopping, working, all of that, cleaning, OCD, you know, you think, okay, if I just go do this, if I'm just perfect, you know, like I think of Steve Jobs, you know, he was adopted twice. And often the word that goes with adoption is given up for adoption. So he was given up for adoption twice. And somewhere, this is my theory, you know, that he figured if I was perfect, then I wouldn't have been given up for adoption. So he set about making insanely great products for Apple. And of course, ultimately this mental thing about not being perfect enough, and everything around him had to be perfect. You had to be perfect. Everything had to be perfect, you know, in the company, which is great for perfection and making a great product. Unfortunately, if you don't go back and reconcile this pattern, it can kill you, which it did to him. Anyway, so the thing is, it's not necessarily going to kill you, but it's just like you're driving uphill, you know, where it's like that thing where, and there's positive mental attitude to overcome it. And that's a lot like you're driving down the road and your car wants to pull to the right, but you hold the steering wheel to keep it from going off to the right. But if you let go of the steering wheel, it's going to steer off to the right. And a simple solution is simply the fact that it's called a front end alignment in your car. You'd go get your car adjusted, and now you can let go of the wheel. Not that you do that a lot, but let go of the wheel, and the car will track straight, which is what you want to do. So you're not trying to, you don't have to overcome it. In a sense, overcoming with, you know, this positive control or positive mental attitude to overcome the faulty thinking, so to speak, or even your active genius at the time. It's just the problem with the so-called active genius at the time when you explain something to yourself like, oh, this is why mommy's angry. This is why daddy does what he does, whatever that is. That explanation becomes a solution you use. And here we are 30, 40, 50, 60 years later, still using that same solution. It doesn't work. And that's where you get into trouble with these patterns. And you wonder, like, what the heck? Likewise, so I say, go back and find that time. So if you're the big elephant, if you can go back to find out when was the first time I was tied to this stake in the ground, and figure out, okay, what was I thinking? What were the circumstances around it? And using the wisdom and the knowledge you have now and experience of life and living in the world, you can look at that and say, okay, this is what was going on around me. And wow, it's not going on around me now, but that's what I was thinking then. That's what was going on. My solution was what became this pattern and all that. And this is really where, you know, if you have a therapist or someone you can talk to about that, this is what therapists can do, is help you see these patterns and how you get back to that first place in the pattern. Because you could say, I was going to let go of this pattern. But the thing is, what happens is you just can't let go of it. But if you can get to the root of it and really see how it's set up, and sometimes it's your idea, and I find for myself a lot of times it wasn't my idea, and I realized, oh, that was her idea. And I'm thinking of my grandmother, for example. She would say to me at dinner time, she'd say, now, go the rounds, you know, because there's meat and vegetables and potato on my plate, let's say. And so I want to eat the meat. And that's the best part. And she'd say, well, save the best until last. And so I had this mentality of save the best until last in my thinking for the longest time. You can imagine how that affected me, you know, at a high school dance. I'd see the girls over there and I go, there's the one I really want to dance with, but I'm not going to dance with that one. I'm going to dance with all the ones I didn't want to dance with. And eventually I'll get to the one I really want to dance with. You know, how crazy is that? Then later on, when I was selling electronic components for Texas Instruments, I drive out into my territory and think, okay, here's the list of clients I have or potential customers I've got. This is the good one. I'm going to start at the bottom and work up. I mean, you think about it, it's completely insane. But why would I do that? Well, because it was somewhere stuck in my head, like an elephant tied to a stick, that I should save the best until last. It was really a ploy to get me to eat my vegetables. You know, I'm going to get the meat anyway, but eat your vegetables. So, but if you eat your meat first, you're not going to be hungry, then you won't want to eat your vegetables, whatever the logic was. But but the saying that stuck in my head, those so-called learned helplessness, the idea, the pattern that recurred was save the best until last. And that when I heard it, I even hear it in my grandmother's voice. It's not even my idea. And then when I realized, oh, it's my grandmother telling me about how I should eat my food when I'm a child, what does that have to do with which customer I call on first or which girl I ask to dance at the dance? Nothing, but it still applied. And so once I realized where that came from, I could let go of that and everything changed. And so that's just an example of how that goes. So really what I want to encourage you to do is when you're in a pattern, you think, that could be your stopper. In fact, there was a blog I read by a woman who was talking about how she felt like, the venture capitalists weren't treating women fairly. They weren't investing in women, blah, blah, blah. I wrote back, I said, this sounds a lot like well, not quite like an elephant tied to a small stick, but I talked about this learned helplessness bit. And for her, that would be her stopping point. The one stopper that was the kryptonite, I can't get past that. And it really wasn't true. I mean, maybe it is true in certain levels. Certain venture capitalists are just don't invest in women. Great. That doesn't mean nobody invests in women. Obviously, that's not true. But if you think that's true, you just think that's the way that it is, that becomes your stopping point. And what you have to do is either A, realize that's simply something you have back in your thinking that somebody said to you was going on, or it goes back to you being the baby elephant tied to the stick, and you realize, wait a minute, not that you're a big elephant now, but you look at it and say, wait a minute, that's not true. It's not really true in the world. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep looking. And that's the point I want to make out of all telling this story is so when you find yourself getting stuck with something, it's kind of like Edison with his light bulb. It took him 1,000+ times to get that light bulb to work. And if he'd come up with some kind of thing, well, guys like me just can't invent light bulbs because I never could, then he would have quit. Likewise, Colonel Sanders, I think it took him 1,117 times, or the numbers all over the place, but at least 1,100 times to pitch Kentucky Fried Chicken to finally get somebody to take him up on it. Now, if he had somewhere in his head that, well, old guys can't cook, or, I never could cook anything, or, my grandmother's recipe for fried chicken never was any good, or whatever, that would have, the first person who said, I don't like your chicken would have been, oh, I knew it. I always knew I couldn't cook chicken, so never mind. But, that wasn't his stopper, and he didn't have one. And if he had any stoppers, apparently they didn't stop him, so he just kept on going. And that's really, it's a shame when an entrepreneur gives up or gives up on financing or something happens and it triggers that sort of kind of a kryptonite moment, which is the learned helplessness, and you stop and you just collapse and I'm done. And so that's a problem. So anyway, so that's that story I wanted to relate, because I think it's an important thing to consider is our own learned helplessness, how we got here from there, where it comes from, how to deal with it, what it means. And it doesn't own you. It's something that you can control. It's just easier to control or get to if you can find the initial place where it happened. Otherwise, you're just kind of like holding that steering wheel, which you can do, and just, I'm doing this anyway. I don't know what the problem is, but I'm going to continue, which is an option, and I've certainly done that myself. It's just a lot nicer when you take your car down, get the front end aligned, and now you can just drive straight. Now you can think about driving where you're going and not constantly trying to hold the car on the road. And that will go a long way, I think, toward your success. So there's that. If you've got a question, please click in the chat box here or click in the Q&A box if you've got a question, and we can do that. Because I'm here for you. I'm here to answer your questions. I can come up with stuff or make something up all day long, but I don't know if that's what you want to hear. So there's that. Also, we're working on our dashboard for all of our apps. Over the years, I've always wanted to put together all of our apps online into a comprehensive dashboard. And if you think that's a good idea, or if you got some ideas, in fact, it's kind of a long-awaited thing, and people have been talking about it. But I wanted to just say that if you had any questions about that, or ideas, or concerns, or curious about it, if you write me at burke@businesspowertools.com. That's BURKE @businesspowertools.com, or type something in the chat box here, and let's answer it. Let's find out. When I help, and when your input on making this product a success. I think it's going to make it a lot easier to use all of our apps. It makes it a lot easier to write letters, write business plans, do financial models. I've got about 1,000 templates in this thing. So everywhere from the business plan to the marketing plan to all employee policies, all of our sample contracts, everything is in it. It's just at your fingertips, and it's just right there to access and use. And I just, any feedback you have on it or that idea at this point, you haven't seen it, I know, but I'm looking for feedback on that. Just some ideas of just, if I could have everything that I wanted in one place, what would I want? And I think if you could answer that question or just have some ideas on it or a wish list or just anything, pull it out of the air. I don't care. Let me know what you think. I appreciate that. So again, Burke@businesspowertools.com. Click on the chat box here if you're watching this live. That's great. So anyway, yeah. So other than that, any questions? Any other things to talk about? I'm looking. I'm waiting. I'll make up something else to talk about here in a moment. But we've been talking about the business plan along the way, and I covered the executive summary a while back. What I was going to talk about, the other one is the market analysis section of the business plan. In the market analysis section is important because investors could look at your business and think, wow, you've got a great solution. There's people with a problem, and you've got the answer to it, and you've got the product that'll solve the problem, alleviate the pain, bring the pleasure they're looking for, whatever it is they want. Yet, but what an investor wants to know is, how many people are there? What's the market for this look like? And part of that analysis is who else is competing with you. But really, first of all, what's the opportunity in terms of the number of people available to buy your product? And I think of eBay, for example. I'm on eBay a lot buying stuff. eBay is like the garage sale for the world. So the world is their oyster, their business. That's pretty big. That's maybe taller than most of us are thinking. In my case, it's businesses. So startups to 50 to 100 employees would be our sweet spot. There's around 400 million businesses in the world, and most of them are in that area. So is it the whole world? No. Is 400 million businesses on the planet a good start? Yeah. Is it a big enough customer base? Absolutely. We don't want to say something like, hey, if I got 1% of that customer base, that's another subject, but really I'll address it now. You never want to say to an investor, hey, if we got 1% of, if we could sell one widget to 1% of all of China, we'd be rich. Well, that's true, but it also shows that you really don't know what 1%, I mean, you might know what 1% is, but is your capacity to reach that 1%, can you reach them? How do you reach them? What's it cost to reach them? Don't use the word 1%. Think about, what percentage you really could get. It's kind of a double-edged sword. On one hand, I would say if I had 1 million subscribers, I would have 0.26% of that 400 million. Well, the number I used originally was 388 million times 1 million is 0.26%. So, but then it's not 1%, it's a quarter of 1%, if you will. And that would be like my goal. So 1 million subscribers paying $20 a month. Ooh, wouldn't that be great? At the same time, I'd be helping 20 million businesses get off the ground, do the right thing, and get going, which is the more important part. So really, it's a matter of the quantity of customers available. So from a business perspective, an investor's perspective, how many customers are there out there that could you possibly reach who would buy from you? And so what we recommend in there also is then to segment those customers. So if I was to use the example of boat anchors, which we put in our financial model, there's sailboats, there's motorboats, there's tugboats, you could maybe break it even into speedboats, there's fishing boats, there's giant cruise ships, there's tankers. Now your boat anchors for a super tanker is going to be different than a boat anchor for a sailboat, but nevertheless, you're in the anchor business, let's say. And so, there's a certain number of freighters, a certain number of sailboats, a certain number of fishing boats, a certain number of any kind of boat. And what you want to do is you want to get a list and figure out and quantify how many of each of those segments there are in the world. Now, you could go to, say, a magazine and look at their subscription list. Maybe you rent their list, buy their list, advertise in their magazine, pay them to send out an email to their list, something like that. But there's a number there. You could go online and go into LinkedIn or Facebook and click the check boxes and say, In this industry, in North America, given this title of people, how many are there? And you'll see like 12,385,000 that you can reach through LinkedIn. And those are just the subscribers on LinkedIn. But it gives you a quantity of people. You could get an idea of what it costs per click. You obviously have a place where you can reach them. And so it's a reachable number of people that you can sell to. And this starts giving the investor the idea like, okay, there's indeed a big enough market to be worthy of investing in your company, because your company can scale to a size where it makes some real money because there's enough customers out there to buy from you. And that's just an important factoid that you want to not necessarily lead with, but early on in your business plan, it's one of the very first questions, like, who are you? What's the problem? What's your solution? Who's the person who's got this problem? How many of them are there? And that's where you want to do it. And you want to segment them, because you could say, okay, let's say, in the first table in our plan, you've got the different segments of boats for boat anchors, and the numbers you have in each cell under, like, we have it under years, but those could change, or it could just stay static, but that same number remains there. That's a fact. I mean, an investor could do their due diligence. They could check it out. Your plan would say, here's where we got those numbers. But the investor could check that out and verify that those numbers are accurate. Presuming they are, there's no argument there. The investor's not going to challenge you there. It's the next table down that says, okay, of the sailboat owners and the 350,000 of them in the world, what percentage of those sailboat owners do we think we can sell an anchor to? And you could say, well, we could sell, maybe let's start out with a 0.1%. And what does that mean? 350 people could buy an anchor in the first month, the first year. I don't know, maybe that's good. So this is the table where you're going to get some challenging, but they might not challenge every single line item. They might just say, you know what, you're not going to sell anything to the super tanker, super freighter crowd. Just put zeros in there. Just forget about it. You're not going to make anchors that big. Okay, great. That doesn't torpedo your whole model. That just takes out one line item. It's not going to radically affect the whole thing. But here you can start to negotiate, or what those percentages that make sense to the investors are, and they can see how these numbers change. So the beauty of it is you've got quantities of customers, and now you can quantify segments of them without adjusting all of them. So I wanted to dwell on that a bit, because that's an important part of your business plan. And just know that when you're pitching this to investors, that this is why they want to know it. And so they might ask you, well, what about, how do you know you're going to sell that many? Well, we could advertise in LinkedIn. It's going to cost us $2.28 a click. And I can put a budget in there of $1,000 a day, and we expect this kind of response out of it. You can test them. You can test the ads. You can test the responses. You can test the conversion from your website. You can test a whole bunch of things. So that's all good stuff. And so that you can share with investors as well down the road. They love this kind of thing, because they're nice people, they're intelligent people, they want to invest in the business. They're there to invest. Venture capitalists, they are praying every day for somebody to come in, please bring me something I can invest in. And they've all got certain criteria. They know what they know. They're good at certain areas. They've got expertise in certain industries. They know the players in these industries. That you could walk in and talk about your idea, and they could either point you in the right direction, they could give you a hard time, they could help you correct your numbers, so to speak. They could also recognize the benefit and the promise of your product or service and your solution. And so what you're demonstrating to them is what you know. That's really what they want. They want to know what you know. And when you're in there talking about it, you can answer the questions intelligently, having done some research and looked things up. They'll ask you, well, how do you know this? Well, we looked up Sailing Magazine, and we could actually rent they'll actually send an email on our behalf for, X dollars a piece or X cents a piece, and we can get this. We would expect some kind of response on that. And, knowing what email responses are going to be like, 1 in 1,000 maybe, you could do your math on that. And the rest of the financial model really is arithmetic. So once you've got the input, the assumptions put in up front, which are how many people have sailboats, how many people have fishing boats, how many people have tugboats, kind of a thing. Pretty soon you get down to just arithmetic. How many people are going to buy it? What's the price they're going to pay? Boom, units sold, revenue generated, all that kind of stuff. And the rest of it is fine tuning, what it's going to cost you to do this. And you'll find out relatively quickly if you have a viable business or not. or as they say in Texas, that dog don't hunt. So and maybe you want to be careful that you don't say, well, we're going to get a 50% response on this mailing, and we're going to make all this money. It's really going to be great. We'll have a successful business. Well, you're not going to get a 50% response on anything. So unless you're talking to your mom and your dad, and your mom buys, but your dad doesn't, doesn't count. Anyway, so that's the thinking behind some of the thinking behind the market research and why it's important to talk about it up front, why it's important to know that about your market, because the investors want to know that you know what you're talking about, and you have different people on your team that can contribute to this. That's important stuff. All right, let me check for questions, other things, and so if you got a question, ask it. Are you in the middle of writing a plan now? Are you pitching investors now? In fact, there's a great book written by Oren Klaff. It's O-R-E-N. His last name is K-L-A-F-F, called Pitch Anything. And when it gets down to the part where you're about to get, putting together your pitch deck, and we've got a good pitch deck. He offers them too. Our pitch deck is, it's logically puts together your pitch based on your business plan. He really elaborates on, the emotional component. Get in there and just get the investor interested in what you're doing. It's not just all numbers, but you want to get them emotionally engaged in what you're doing and how it's going to be, and they're liking you. And so the whole thing really, it's not so much about getting the check in that first moment. It's about having them really want to be interested in your deal. And so then you can work out the details afterwards. But this initial pitch is really getting these investors interested in your deal. And he goes to a lot of effort to explain it to you. He's got a whole class on doing that. The book Pitch Anything steps you through and walks you through it, like how to think, how to be, how to psych yourself up for the meeting, all that kind of stuff. And so that's important. But the thing I would add to the psyching yourself up for the meeting, I said it earlier, is that investors, they want to invest. They're pulling for you. Okay, you're walking in the door. Let's see what you got. It's kind of like Shark Tank. Won't get into the gory details of Shark Tank, what I know about some things from behind the scenes from people who've been on the show. But the whole point is those guys are sitting there thinking, show me something. Show me, as one venture capitalist in Silicon Valley put it, show me something I can believe. And that's part of it. It's showing them something they can believe. So a great idea, great presentation, you demonstrating you know what you're talking about, show them something they can believe, and anyway, and as Oren Klaff says, you need to be the prize. I mean, the uniqueness of what your deal is you. So these guys want to invest in you because they want you to drive it. You're the one who gets it. You're the one who knows this business. You're the one to do it. And so we've got to recognize that you're not in there, oh, please give me some money. No, and without being arrogant at the other end of the spectrum, it's like, hey, I got this thing. We figured this out. You want to invest in me because we're going to do this thing. So, and then what I would add back to this would be, I have a whole thing where I talk about, well, what are all the things you can do that don't require money, that puts you in the best position so when you do need money, you've got all the stuff in place. A board of advisors, a board of directors, some potential customers, your suppliers lined up, you've got your costs. You certainly have your business plan, your whole roadmap, your movie script of what you're going to do with this business. So then when the investors do make a present, if you do need the money, you may even talk about ways you can get what you need without raising the capital. And I have this story about a client of ours who got 2 Learjets. And he went out to raise capital to buy some jets. Instead, he found a guy who owned 2 jets, showed him the plan, and the guy, the gentleman had his airplane, 2 Learjets, were in a leasing program with some other company. And he took him out of that other program, put him in with our customer, because our customer had such a compelling plan of what he was going to do with these jets and how he would make the jet owner money, or make money for himself. He just thought he needed to go raise capital to buy jets. And he talked to me at one point. So I'm having a hard time. What's wrong with this picture? And I said, well, a guy with some airplanes you could talk to. Well, sure enough, he finds a guy with airplanes, and the guy says, yeah, take my airplanes. In effect, he got 2 airplanes for free. Now, obviously, he has to pay them off, but he's not buying them. He's using them. He got 2 airplanes to use for free, and he pays the shares the revenue with the owner, which is a good deal. But he doesn't. How much capital does he need to raise now? And now, what's his business model? Does he have to go out and buy airplanes? Not at all. There's a lot of people, a lot of companies out there with airplanes that they're not using all the time that he can go use when he needs them. Tells them, hey, you're a top priority. We can manage your airplane for you. In the meantime, we'll fly other people around in it, take care of it professionally, you'll make money, or offset your cost of having it. What's not to like? It's That's a beautiful thing, but didn't cost him a lot of money. He didn't have to go out and sell, shares of his business to raise capital to buy jets. So that's an idea that, like, wow, I really like to do that. So I'm trying to help you not have to raise capital. However, the things you do on the way to doing that would be the things you would do on the way to raising capital. So you'd be in the best position to attract money. So that's that. Anyway, okay. I am not seeing any other questions yet. So ask me a question. How's the, here's a friend of mine from way back when. In the medical business, how's the medical business going? You selling syringes? That's always interesting. So I happen to know Mark's business. Come on, ask me a question. All right, so what else could I tell you? I could talk about business planning. We could talk about employee policies. I think about employee policies. Now, you may or may not have employees, but it's amazing how, I don't know, how this product became to have more than 200 policies in it. It's just staggering. Even the HR consultants say you don't need 200 policies. Although we cover 200, the way we do everything is a menu tree with a checkbox. And every item's got checkboxes on it, so you can go through it. I recommend people click on everything first and then go back through and unclick the parts you don't want to use. So there's a few parts you don't want to use. There's some parts that, we tell you, this is good if you're a really big company, like a grievance procedure. I mean, grievance procedure, really, you don't need a grievance procedure if you're a big company, maybe you have a union shop. Otherwise, you just use your words and talk about it. So, here he is. So it's another question. Menu checkbox is awesome. Used it in the first iteration of your product. Loved it. Hey man, good to hear. So that's cool. Anyway, yeah. So the new dashboard is everything in it. It's got every product. It's got menus, it's checkboxes, and it's just, we wanted to make it just easy to use so you have what you need to do your business. There's just so many things that you have to send somebody a letter. You have to write a contract. You have to put together some memo, something, minutes for your meetings, kind of stuff. What do you say? How do you say it? What's in the, rather than giving you just a blank piece of paper and saying, hey, fill in your management, your job description here. How about starting out with a database of 700 job descriptions? So I'm just curious, what all if you had such a thing, what would you want to see in it? And what, because we've got the hood's open, the programmers are working on it. And as long as we're into the thick of the thing, this is the time to start adding some things. It's like when you're building a new house, do you want the tile floor? This is the time to talk about the tile floor, or what you want for the kitchen countertops. You'll probably have it already figured out ahead of time, but while they're building it, this is the time to think up that stuff. So I don't keep this going that long. If there's people on here asking questions, I'm happy to answer them. I could go all afternoon, but I won't. If there aren't any questions and you're just enjoying listening and paying attention and watching and learning something, that's great. I'm just keeping this short, and I'll just do it for this. So far, we've been on here about a half an hour, and I'm happy to answer many more questions if you have it. Here's a question. Let's see. Is the new like the old? The day you opened the old program, it pulled you right in and showed the clever simplicity. Yeah, we have the simple template where you have different options. It's kind of like everything's multiple choice, like multiple choice paragraphs. So here's your management team description, and here's multiple paragraphs. You don't use them all, you just use the ones that make sense. But if you read them all, you'll see some different ideas of how to go about it. And then we thought we got clever, and we put in a wizard that had you check the boxes before you could see the paragraphs. Like, well, which paragraph are you going to use? Which one of these? And I think that made it actually kind of hard to use, because if you didn't really know what was going on behind the scenes, it's kind of hard to check the box. I guess it'd be like going to the store like Trader Joe's and saying, check the box if you want vegetables. Well, what vegetables are available, So just show me the vegetables, I'll grab the bag I want and keep going. And so what we did is we took the wizard out. And so now when you get it, you open up the business plan. And you'll see, for example, like what company style are we? And it's got the paragraph that says we're going to be a C Corp, the paragraph that says we're going to be an S Corp, the paragraph that says we're going to be a partnership, because each of those paragraphs also includes an explanation of why. And that's the thing where the investors are going to know, why did you choose a C corp? Partly either setting up because they want to see what you know about incorporation or structure. And this came up in an investor presentation that I was really in the audience for this one. But the entrepreneurs that presenting at the front of the room to a room full of investors, and these were angel investors. Every single one of them, I presume, could have pulled out a checkbook out and written a check for the entire amount of what these guys were pitching for. Yet, so one of the investors says, where are you incorporated? And the guy says, we're incorporated in Nevada. And the angel didn't like that. He says, I don't never invest in a company incorporated in Nevada because you don't have to reveal the management team, you don't have to reveal the ownership of that company. Now, in a way, that's kind of cool. You could have a company, you don't have to reveal the ownership, so incorporate in Nevada. I think Wyoming and maybe New Mexico does that too. Anyway, all the other angels go, ooh, they put their checkbooks back in their pocket. Instead, what my guy should have said, well, where would you like us to incorporate? And if we did, would you invest? Kind of used car salesman-y stuff. If I could show you in green, would you buy it today? But, that's really, that would have been the right answer. Instead, he waffled and, I don't know what to do, and it was like a deer in headlights. And that was really tragic because I thought he had an interesting business model. The investment wasn't that much. It was all around, I thought, a good deal, except this Nevada incorporation thing blew him up. So now we even tell this story in the business plan. So when the investor does ask you that question, you have a reasonable answer. And you also have a response that says, hey, if you want me to be a C Corp incorporated in Delaware, which seems to be very common, we'll do it. Or if you're thinking of it right off the bat, you're going to need venture capital, you might want to go ahead and incorporate into Delaware in the beginning. And that way you say we're Delaware C Corp. Answers a bunch of questions, so all done. So that's easy. But we went back to the point is we wanted to, instead of giving you check boxes up front in a wizard, we would give you the actual answers on the back end, and you just read the different ones, and you're going to end up just deleting stuff. So it's like multiple choice. We don't leave you with any blank pages. Even the blanks, so-called blanks, have some ideas in them to prompt you with the idea of what to say. And so we reverted back old school on that to maintain the simplicity, but then updated the content to make it all up to date today. So between the check boxes and the simplicity of the content, I think you have everything you need. And of course, you could also edit and add and subtract and do whatever else you want to do to customize it completely. I don't think I've ever sold a product that the person who bought it didn't want to tweak it in some way. It's like you buy a suit at the store. You got to get it tailored to fit. It's something about you that needs to take it in a little bit here and take it in a little there, let it out over here. But that's what they do. They dial it in and it fits well. So there's that. Does that answer your question? I think it just says what we do. So any other questions on this and what we're doing, what you're doing? I'm here to help you. I'm not here to pitch the product. I'm here to explain things and make it easier for you to understand some stuff. There are videos with the business plan. There's videos with each section. That's basically me telling you, hey, here's some things to think about in this area of the business. It's kind of like I think of it like I'm the movie director and you're the actor I'm telling you, okay, here's how to play this scene. This is what the audience is looking for. Here's how to think about this section and what to say here. We don't have videos on the other products. They all have comments with them that says, okay, look, this is what you're thinking here. This is why this paragraph's in here. This is why this section's in here. You make and delete it if this is your circumstance. Embellish it if this is your circumstance, kind of a thing. And so, again, it's just the idea is to keep you going without having you have to go somewhere else or call up for advice or something. It's all there. So anyway, all right, it's 40 minutes in. I'm going to turn you loose because I think we've had enough, or maybe you've had enough. I'll be back here next Monday. If you're looking at this on the recording, go back to the page where you clicked on this recording, click the send me an email to remind me to come to this. All you do is give us your first name and email address. You can unsubscribe anytime you want. We're using the Zoom video meeting system, webinar system. It sends you a reminder, a week ahead of time. It sends you a reminder 24 hours ahead of time. It sends you a reminder an hour ahead of time saying, hey, the FAQ webinar with Burke is on in an hour. I wish I'd send it to you at the last minute. That's probably too much, you know. The topic next week, I see the question, what is the topic next week? Well, that'll be the next step in our business plan. I do have an idea. Well, there's other things we can talk about. So yeah, we could talk about, the next step would be we talked a little bit about the company organization. We've been talking about the executive summary in the last session or two. We talked about market analysis. We could talk about your product or service and some things there. There's some things to say about that. So we'll talk about products and services next time and describing them, how far to go with it. I had somebody hand me a business plan that was practically as thick as a telephone book. And it was like they used a whole ream of paper, which is 500 sheets, to describe their product. Overkill. just don't start me on that. We'll talk about that next week. Anyway, okay. So thanks for showing up. Thanks for watching. If you've got a question, send it to me at burke@businesspowertools.com. Come to the page here where you've got this recording from. Click on the send me an email to get added to the list. It's not a list of anything else. It's just a reminder to come to this session. And I'll see you next week.